What if I told you that Ferrari has been sabotaging, without knowing it, to his own star pilot? What if I told you that Hamilton was not wrong, but betrayed by his own team? It all starts with the simulator. What for any modern team is the soul of its technical development, for Ferrari it became a trap. The data that were introduced into that system, sensor data, wind tunnel tests, dynamic banks, were vitiated. The root of the problem was not only the simulator in itself, but the way the systems were integrated. There was a disconnection between what was tested in the laboratory and what was taken to the track. Each simulation that Hamilton completed, every change he recommended, was processed through a chain of technical failures that returned illusory values. In practice, this meant that Hamilton could spend 10-15 hours in the Maranello factory refining details, feeling the car in virtual environments with surgical precision, believing that this time would translate into tenths of second one on the track. But when he arrived at the Grand Prix, he was with a completely different car from the one he had studied. It was not a matter of personal sensations or lack of adaptation. It was an involuntary structural manipulation that distorted its preparation. Literally, the Ferrari that Hamilton imagined did not exist. This led the team to an internal audit that, according to sources close to paddock, was driven by the accumulated frustration of the pilot himself. It was not a simple complaint. Hamilton, with its level of detail and discipline, delivered a list of observations and comparisons between the behavior of the car in simulator and on the track that forced the engineers to re-evaluate everything. And it was there when the real drama was uncovered. Multiple layers of the technical system were feeding each other with false data, and no one had detected it. The result was a kind of domino effect of errors that sabotaged every attempt to improve. For a pilot like Lewis, this is not just a technical inconvenience. It is a professional nightmare. His work style, based on years of meticulous collaboration with Mercedes, where each simulation had a direct translation in performance, he found a wall in Ferrari. Every time he asked for a change, every time he suggested a direction of setup, the car responded erratically, without coherence with what he had previously experienced. And that, for someone who builds their trust in the car through technical logic, is devastating. The psychological impact of this revelation is deep. Hamilton was not only technically sabotaged, he was emotionally isolated. Internally, engineers began to doubt their comments. From the outside, some media and analysts hinted that he was losing his level. But now we know that reality was much more complex and much more serious. It was not he who was misaligned with the car. It was the car that had been designed on a lie. This discovery questions not only the performance of the SF25, but the technical culture of Ferrari as a whole. Because if such a serious mistake can go unnoticed for so long, it means that there is a lack of deep structural control. And if this has affected Hamilton, there is no guarantee that he has not also compromised the development of Leclerc, or even the 2026 project. The silence with which Ferrari has handled this internal crisis suggests that they understand it perfectly. This is not just a technical error. It is a direct threat to its credibility as a leading team. And Hamilton's reaction, although measured in public, has been fulminating within the team walls. According to nearby reports, he personally requested a restructuring of data validation flows, new cross-verification processes between simulator and track, and a complete review of the aerodynamic correlation model. When talking about Ferrari SF25, we are not simply facing a car with problems. We are facing a car that was born with structural defects that condition each decision that the team makes, from the tuning to the type of strategies they can apply in the race. And in the case of Lewis Hamilton, these defects have not only limited their adaptation, they have directly sabotaged their ability to compete. One of the most critical aspects of SF25 is its very operational window. In simple terms, this means that the car only yields to its optimal level within an extremely limited strip of conditions. A slight change in the track temperature is enough. In the type of asphalt, in wind pressure, or even at the time of the car's behavior, it deteriorates drastically. Hamilton himself described him as almost invisible, a phrase that is not pronounced lightly when it comes from a pilot who has been world champion in 3 different techniques. The main difficulty lies in the control of the car driving height, a parameter that directly affects aerodynamics, stability, and traction. The SF25 is so sensitive to this factor that engineers have had to deal with a platform that constantly oscillates between optimal performance and total disaster. At the technical level, this implies that any correction in the suspension, at the docks, or even in the pressure of the tires can generate unexpected side effects in other areas of the car. It is a fragile balance, which requires surgical precision to stay within the ideal operation range. But the problem is even deeper. The car does not respond predictably to changes. There is a gap between what engineers expected to occur when modifying certain parameters and what really happens on the track. This creates a nervous, distrustful car, which changes humor without prior notice. And for a pilot like Hamilton, who needs consistency to build his confidence return, this lack of stability is lethal. You can't attack a curve when you don't know if the car is going to answer you the same as the previous return. You cannot push in a classification turn if there is a doubt that the car loses grip in the last sector. It's like running a fencing race with bandaged eyes. In private, some engineers already recognize it. The car is committed from its base. And the question that begins to circulate in Maranello's halls is devastating. Is it worth continuing to invest in a chassis that is condemned to fail? Hamilton's experience with SF25 thus becomes a warning. It is not just the story of a pilot trying to adapt to a complicated car. It is the story of an institution that faced its own technical limitations and lost. What is at stake is not only the 2025 season, but Ferrari's technical prestige as a Formula One builder. And if they do not act quickly, that prestige could be more damaged than no tifosi could bear. After the devastating finding in its simulation systems and the structural collapse of the SF25, Ferrari has entered a critical phase. What happens in the coming weeks will determine whether we are facing a turning point towards the resurgence of the rampant Cavallino, or in front of the beginning of a new technical and sports collapse. Because one thing is clear, there is no space for half-inks. The revelation of internal failures has divided the team into two fronts. On the one hand, there are those who believe that this is the time to break with everything, to abandon the technical concept of the SF25 and start from scratch with a new architecture for the 2026 car. For this more radical sector, the so-called Project 678 key name of the car of next year should represent an absolute rupture, without commitments, without patches on the wound. They argue that the current system, both digital and physical, is rotten from the root. That any attempt to evolve will simply drag the poison towards the next season. In the midst of this institutional storm is Lewis Hamilton. The seven-time world champion has witnessed everything from within. His arrival in Maranello was not just a change of uniform. It was a commitment to reinvention, a last great adventure to add a golden chapter to its legacy. But instead of finding fertile terrain for your knowledge and experience, it has encountered a disorganized, inefficient structure and now betrayed by its own systems. Because far from collapsing before chaos, he has begun to raise his voice. Internally, it has demanded a transformation of the technical command chains. He has pushed for the hiring of external experts in simulator pista correlation. And according to several sources, he has even suggested to bring some of his former trusted engineers with him, although that means pressing the current people responsible for Ferrari. Renaissance or collapse. There is no middle ground. Ferrari is on the tightrope, and meanwhile the world observes. And now that everything has come to light, the question is no longer whether Ferrari can save the season, but if he is willing to face himself. The finding of structural errors in its simulator, the performance crisis of the SF25, the internal fracture around the 678 project, and the polarizing figure of Lewis Hamilton has turned Maranello into a battlefield where the championship is not only disputed, but the identity of a historical team that seems to have forgotten what it means to be Ferrari. This moment is not just about correcting a defective car. It is an opportunity, perhaps the last one in this era, to redefine who leads the technical revolution in Formula One. Because while McLaren continues his solid ascent, while Red Bull wobbles under his own internal pressure, and while Mercedes patience his winning machinery, Ferrari is trapped between the weight of his legacy and the urgency of his present. Hamilton has brought more than experience. He has brought a new way of thinking. An absolute demand for professionalism, technical control, structural responsibility. And now that he has discovered the magnitude of the problem, he will not stay with crossed arms. This is not a pilot who agrees to be part of a failure narrative. He is someone who has demonstrated, again and again, who can transform an organization from within. The question is, will Ferrari allow you to do it? Or will it make it another name in the long list of promises that Maranello let out? And you who have come here, you know that this is much more than a story of fast cars and spectacular overtaking. It is a history of technical betrayals, of leaderships in dispute, of identities in crisis. It is the story of how a team can build its fall without even realizing, and also how you can, if you have the value, reconstruct from the ashes. What do you think will happen now? Is this the spark that ignites a new golden era for Ferrari? Or simply another frustrating episode in a decade of accumulated errors? Can Hamilton really change the DNA of the rampant Cavallino, or will it end up being devoured by him? Leave me your thoughts in the comments. I want to read what you would do if you were in command of Ferrari at this time.